Maddy report. We're talking with California's LAO, Mac Taylor. Mac, the governor's talked about this $35 billion wall of debt that still has to be addressed. Number one, is that an accurate number? And number two, what does it cost the taxpayers in interest payments each year to service the debt?
Well, yeah, I think it's an accurate number. And
it is an accurate number?
Yes, and okay. It refers to budgetary actions that we've taken in recent years to try to address prior budget problems that have implications for future budgets. For example, we have bonds that the voters approved and we issued to pay off a past deficit, and now we're still having to make payments every year.
Those are those credit card payments that Arnold Schwarzenegger was talking about.
Well, yeah, they're bonds, and they cost us over $2 billion a year to pay them off. So the kind of servicing charge you ask about, it's about $2.5 billion on all of that $35 billion. Now, just to make it clearer, that's only talking about what we refer to as budgetary debt. It does not include general obligation bonds, bonds issued to pay for infrastructure.
High-speed rail?
High-speed rail or schools, whatever. And it does not include pension-related unfunded liabilities or retirement benefits like state health payments to retirees.
And my understanding is that the retiree health care isn't even...
It's not pre-funded at all.
Pre-funded at all.
So we have a roughly $50 billion obligation there.
Well, let's not talk about that for a moment. Let's just deal with the $35 billion that's in front of us. Okay, so there is this $35 billion wall of debt that's somewhat accurate figure, and it's costing us, you said, about $2.5 billion to service that debt each year out of the general fund of?
Roughly $90 billion.
$90 billion, okay. You know, California's credit rating used to be AAA, the best in the country, the best there is. Now it's an A-, the worst there is. Will the governor's calls for limiting the state's general obligation borrowing help our credit rating and or reduce the current budget deficit?
Well, I think it will do both. It can help as a short-term solution to the extent we don't issue quite as much general obligation bond debt as we otherwise would have. You have less debt service payments. But I think more importantly is as a signal to that we're trying to get our budget back in order. And what will really improve our credit rating is if we can convince investors that we're not only addressing this year's budget problem, but we're making real inroads into that so-called structural deficit, that ongoing problem that the state has had now for quite a while.
You know, I wanted to ask you about that in terms of Wall Street. If they see that we're attacking this problem, will the interest payments then go down a little bit?
I think that is in line with if you have an improved credit rating, your interest rate payments should be a little bit better. They should be lower as your rating goes up. So certainly that will happen as we get a better budget situation.
Now, you've also mentioned about the state's structural deficit. We hear a lot about that. Can you explain what that is and if the governor's budget addresses that issue?
You know, it's like with a family. If you have $100,000 coming in from two spouses that work, and you're spending $120,000, you got a problem. That's an ongoing problem. Now, you can have a short-term problem. Maybe one spouse had their hours cut temporarily, but those hours were restored. You wouldn't have an ongoing structural problem. What we've identified is that the state really does have a shortfall, a difference between ongoing spending and our revenues, ongoing revenues, of about $20 billion.
Now, how far forward are you looking at that?
We forecast for about 5 years. So it's not just a 1 or 2 year problem that will go away as the economy improves. It's something where we need to take actions either by reducing on an ongoing basis our spending commitments or increasing our revenues.
We've only got about a minute left in this segment. I wanted to ask you about Governor Brown's proposal to some pretty major changes. One of them was dealing with redevelopment agencies. Also enterprise zones. He seems to have backed off on the enterprise zone issue, so let's focus on RDAs for a second. In light of the increased revenue and frankly the pushback from a lot of locals about the elimination of RDAs, is that still necessary in your opinion, the elimination of RDAs to balance the budget? Now, my recollection is that's $1.7 billion.
According to the governor's plan, it would be a one-time $1.7 billion solution, and the governor has left that on the table. He is still advocating that we terminate redevelopment agencies and get this savings, and then also other local governments would get savings not only in the coming year, but in future years. So it is still on the table. Is it needed? Well, we still have roughly $10 billion in solutions that we need to find in order to close our budget gap. So that still is on the table as one possible way to address that remaining shortfall.
Okay, well, I'd like to thank Mac Taylor for joining us. When we come back, we'll discuss what the May revise means politically going forward. That conversation in a moment. This is the Maddy Report.